Deep Purple broke up in 1976. No farewell tour, no grand send-off, just a band that had burned so hot for so long that it finally burned itself out. Richie Blackmore was gone, the chemistry was gone, and for 4 years, the silence was deafening. But demand never went anywhere. By 1980, Deep Purple were one of the most in-demand bands in the world, a band that didn't exist anymore. And in that gap between what fans desperately wanted and what reality could provide was one very shady promoter who saw an opportunity, not to reunite Deep Purple, but to fake one. What followed was one of the most brazen frauds in rock history, a full-scale tour, dozens of dates across North America, audiences paying real money to see a band that wasn't there, and by the time anyone realized what had happened, the damage was done. This is the story of the Bogus Deep Purple. Let's start with the man behind the curtain because this wasn't some amateur operation. Steve Green ran a talent agency called Advent Talent Associates, and he had a very specific, very cynical business model. Find a defunct band with massive name recognition, exploit a legal loophole, hire cheap musicians, cash out before the lawsuits catch up. He'd already run this playbook once. With Steppenwolf, Green put together a completely unauthorized reunion featuring 0 original members, just session players wearing the name like a Halloween costume. It worked briefly, until Steppenwolf's real frontman, John Kay, found out and sued. That lawsuit taught Green something important. Next time, he needed at least one genuine former member on the board, a legal shield, someone who could give the whole thing a veneer of legitimacy. So for his next target, Deep Purple, he went looking for that one person. His first call went to Nick Simper, the band's original bassist. Simper heard the pitch, smelled a rat, and he said no. Smart man. But then Green found Rod Evans. Rod Evans was Deep Purple's original singer. He was there at the very beginning in 1968 when the band recorded Hush, a song that cracked the American top 5 and put them on the map. He sang on the first 3 albums. He was, in every legal sense, a co-founder of Deep Purple. He was also completely out of the music business. By 1980, Evans had been working as a respiratory therapist for years. He wasn't plugged into the industry. He wasn't keeping tabs on what his former bandmates were doing, and Green exploited every bit of that distance. Green convinced Evans that a new Deep Purple was entirely legitimate, that Evans had a legal claim to the name, that this was his chance to cash in on something he'd helped build, that everyone would win, and Evans, without a financial pressure, naivety, or both, signed on. What he didn't fully grasp was how the corporate structure was designed to protect Green and hang Evans out to dry. Evans was made the sole shareholder and director of the venture. The musicians, the booking agents, all mere employees. If the whole thing collapsed, every ounce of legal liability would land on one man, the guy with a legitimate claim to the name, not the guy who engineered the scam. The rest of the lineup was assembled from the same fake Steppenwolf backing band Green had been running. Guitarist Tony Flynn, dressed head to toe in black to evoke Richie Blackmore. Keyboardist Jeff Emery, tasked with filling John Lord's considerable shoes. Bassist Tom De Rivera, drummer Dick Jurgens III, complete unknowns, session players without the session pedigree. And then there was the marketing, which was where the real deception happened. In the pre-internet era, local promoters had no way of cross-checking anything. Green's agency fed venues just enough official-looking paperwork to make the booking seem credible. The fine print sometimes read the new Deep Purple, but the posters, the radio spots, the marquees, just 2 words, Deep Purple, no asterisk, no clarification, nothing to warn a fan in Amarillo, Texas, they weren't getting Richie Blackmore. Green booked nearly 70 dates across the US, Canada, and Mexico before the real band even knew what was happening. The tour opened on May 17, 1980 at the Civic Center in Amarillo, Texas. The audience came expecting legends. They got a cover band. The show lasted 40 minutes. That was all the crowd could take before objects started flying, bottles, trash, whatever fans could get their hands on, aimed directly at the stage. The band fled the building, opening night, and it was already a disaster. But here's what made the fraud so audacious. They kept going. They didn't call it off after Amarillo. Green had dozens more dates booked and money on the line, so the band pressed on. The musical problems were obvious from the start. Rod Evans is a perfectly decent singer, but his style, his voice, his range, all that was calibrated to the Deep Purple of 1968 and 1969. The band playing Smoke on the Water and Highway Star every night. Evans had never sung those songs in his life. Those were Ian Gillan compositions from an era Evans had no part in. The tempos drifted, the solos were thin. Reviewers who sat through the shows were left shaking their heads. At a club gig in New Jersey, the band barely finished the opening song before a fan stormed the stage screaming, "You're not Deep Purple." At a venue in Staten Island, packed beyond comfortable capacity, the show was canceled before Evans could even perform. The announcers citing safety concerns as bottles rained towards the stage. Then there was Utah in July, the outdoor country jam gig where the PA system completely broke down. The band refused to take the stage. Without sound, the crowd rioted. And Long Beach, California in August, where they somehow made it through the set, left the stage in dead silence, and then watched fans riot on the way out, setting trash cans on fire across arena grounds. Back home, the real Deep Purple's management team, John Coletta and Tony Edwards, had been watching the disaster unfold with mounting horror. They took out full-page ads in papers like the Los Angeles Times, explicitly stating that Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Lord, and Pace would not be appearing at any of these shows. Then they went to federal court. A lawsuit was filed under the Lanham Act, federal trademark law, arguing that the Bogus Tour was deliberately misleading consumers and doing real damage to Deep Purple's reputation. As evidence, the lawyers called local music critics to testify about how bad the performances were. That's a remarkable legal maneuver. Expert witnesses for how terrible a concert was. The court ruled decisively in the real band's favor. Rod Evans was hit with a judgment of $672,000, roughly $168,000 in compensatory damages for actual losses, and $504,000 in punitive damages designed to make an example, plus over $143,000 in legal fees. Now, Steve Green, Advent Talent Associates, the booking agents and session musicians, they walked. The corporate structure had done exactly what it was designed to do. Evans couldn't pay. He didn't have that kind of money, so the court ordered something arguably worse than a fine, a permanent forfeiture of all of his royalties. Every cent he was owed from Deep Purple's first three albums, Shades of Deep Purple, The Book of Taliesin, the self-titled Deep Purple, every stream, every radio play, every physical sale of Hush, redirected to pay off the debt. Financially ruined and publicly humiliated, Rod Evans disappeared. He never performed again. He gave no interviews. He went completely off the grid. When the real Deep Purple were included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Evans wasn't there. John Lord, when asked about the lawsuit later, put it plainly. The legal action wasn't about money. It was about protecting something they'd built, about what happens when the name you made means nothing anymore. There's a footnote worth mentioning. On June 28, 1980, in the middle of this chaos, the Bogus Deep Purple played the Estadio Indio Olímpico in Mexico City. Mexico had been largely shut off from international rock acts due to government restrictions, and fans there were starved for live music. A Brazilian TV crew captured some footage of the show, Rod Evans singing Smoke on the Water to thousands of confused fans who had no way of knowing what they were actually watching. It's one of the stranger artifacts in rock history, a fake band in front of an innocent crowd performing songs the singer had never originally recorded in a country that had no idea of any of what was happening. By mid-August, the tour was hemorrhaging money from cancellations and legal pressure. When the federal injunction came through, the promoters abandoned ship entirely, leaving Evans, the venues, and the local promoters to sort through the wreckage. The real reunion, the one fans actually wanted, came 4 years later in 1984 when the legendary Mark II lineup of Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Lord, and Pace came back together for real. That's a story for another episode. But this one matters because it's a reminder of what a band's name is actually worth and how ruthlessly that value can be exploited when the people who built it aren't watching. Rod Evans paid the price for trusting the wrong person. Steve Green walked away clean. So this is one of these weird one-off stories that I found that I wanted to make a video on. It's not after an actual album, but if I find any more of these little stories, I'll add them to the complete story of Deep Purple, which is in this playlist right here, covering the entire story of Deep Purple, including adjacent bands, Rainbow, Whitesnake, Gillan, the Ian Gillan Band, Select, Black Sabbath, and a few others. Check it out, like, subscribe. See you in the next one.